Today's daf we're going to learn is Ketubot daf Pei Aleph, or Rosh Hashanah. Unfortunately, not much connection between the daf and Rosh Hashanah. Today's daf is, this month's learning is sponsored by Terry Kravosha for the refuah shlema of her husband, Rav Chaim Yehuda Ben Fega Riva. It was a zchut to be able to listen to Rabbanit Michelle's live daf, which is through Zoom, during the past 3 weeks while I was in Jerusalem. Today's daf is sponsored by Jason, Eric, and Raquel in honor of their mother, Patty Belkin's birthday, wishing a happy birthday to our amazing mother. Mom, you renew and inspire us every day. Today's daf is sponsored for the Shloshim of Howie Farkas, Shalom Tzvi Ben Necha Dvora. Okay, with that, we'll get started. So we had a Mishna. The Mishna discussed a woman who is waiting to do yibum. Okay, so for those who learned Masechet Yibamot, some of this will be familiar. We have a woman whose husband died without children. She's supposed to marry the brother. But before she marries the brother, she dies. Okay, so now the question is, what happens with the brother's property and what happens with her ketuba money? So we have basically the brother's property will be split between his own brothers. That's easy. And that will be the case whether if one of the brothers does chalitza and then there's no yibum, then also the brothers split it equally. If one of the brothers would have married her, he would have gotten all the property of the brother. So in this case, he was supposed to marry the brother's wife. Question is, what happens to property that what happens to basically her ketuba money? So we split it in two. There's the ketuba money, and then there's the nichse melog, which are things that she brought into the first marriage as heirlooms, as I like to call them, right? It's not always heirlooms, but it's a way to remember the type of things. Those go to her father, right? Again, according to Beit Hillel, right? This is a machloket in the Mishna, and there were different ways to understand it, but let's just go with the interpretation that all the ketuba money goes to her husband. So her potential future husband, the brother of, right, he's called the yabam, the brother of her deceased husband. So the Gemara wants to know, again, we'll start from where the Gemara starts. If she dies, who buries her? The kvura, the rights, the fact that the husband has to bury his wife is in place of the fact that he inherits her ketuba money. Now, in this case, her ketuba money is somewhat split, because not her ketuba money, but right, anything she brought into the marriage that was nichse melog is going to go to her family. Anything that was stuff that the husband was supposed to pay her is going to go to his brother. So the question is, what part is the important part, right? Like, what's the relevance here? Which one is relevant to the burial? So Yorshea bal kavrela deka yarte ketubata. Do we say the inheritors of her husband, meaning his brothers, are responsible to bury her because they inherit her ketuba? So we saw. Odilma Yorshea av kavrela, or maybe it's her father's, right? All her family's responsible because they get the nichse melog. Okay, again, depending on how you interpret the Mishnah, but let's just go with nichse melog. Amar of Amram Tashma. So Amram is going to bring a source to prove which way we go. Titania, it says in a braita, Shomeret yabam shemeta, Yorsheha, Yorshek to bata, Chayavim b'kvurata. Her inheritors, so it says here in a braita explicitly, a Shomeret yabam, exactly our case. She dies before she does yibum. The ones who inherit her ketuba, which is the husband, right? That's not the nichnasim and nichnasim biyotzimima, not the ones that go in and out with her at the marriage. This is the ketuba itself. They're the ones who are chayavim b'kvurata. They have to bury her. And Amar Abaye, Afa Ananami Tanina. Abaye says, I'm going to prove this from a braita. So Rav Amram says that Abaye wants to prove him. And then we're going to have Rava who comes in and disagrees. And we're going to have a whole back and forth. Today's stuff is going to be a little bit complicated because there's back and forth. And within the back and forth, there's like questions and answers before we even get to answer or respond to the main claim. Sometimes there's an argument within. Okay, so I'll organize it in a way that you get it, but be prepared because it's a ping pong, but not necessarily so clear. One. Okay, we'll get there. So right now it's pretty simple. We have Rav Amram who brings it from a braita, and Rav Abaye says I can even derive it from a Mishna. Now the Mishna's topic is not Shomeret Yabam, which is why Rav Amram didn't bring it right away. It's not as clear, but Abaye is going to say it's pretty clear. It's talking about a Shomeret Yabam. So it says in the Mishnah, Almanat nizonet minichse yitomi. The almanah gets sustenance from the orphans. Umaaseh yadeha shalahen. And in place of that, she gives them her salary. Ve'ein chayavim b'kvurata. But the Yorshim of the father, okay, again, this is not relevant yet, are not responsible for burying her. who is then your sheha, her heirs are responsible. Now, it could have just said her heirs. Instead, what did it say? Your sheha, in other words, there's her heirs that are her sons, and then there's her husband's heirs, which could include children from other marriages. So her heirs, they're your sheikh ketubata, the ones who will inherit her ketuba. Remember, those are her banim scharim that get her ketuba money. Chayavi b'tfurata. Now, to which they say, what do you mean? Her banim scharim are her yorshim. They're also the ones that get her ketuba, but it's all one and the same. So they have to find a case where the yorsheha are not the only yorshim, and there's some that are yorshim ketubata, and some that inherit some other parts. And ezo hi amana sheyesh la shnei yorshim, because this Mishnah sounds like we're talking about a case where there's two groups of heirs, and the ones who get her ketuba are the ones who inherit her. In what case could that possibly be? Usually it's just her male children, or her female if she doesn't have male children. So the truth is her female children don't get her ketuba, so forget that. So it's really only a shomeret yabam who's going to be in this scenario. And therefore, Abaye says this Mishnah must be referring to our case. And here, what do you see? They're responsible to bury her. Okay, so we have Rav Amram from a braita. We have Abaye who strengthens it from a Mishnah. And with Mishnah that's going to come up later. Anyway, now comes Rava and says, no way, no how. Amar Rava v'lema. The brother could claim, now we always have, if you want to take money out of someone's hands, you got to prove it. Now, who's got to pay the money for the burial? The brother, the yabam. So if he's responsible, well, it's going to have to be clearly proven, meaning he has no way out. But he does have a way out. He could say like this, Ach ani yoresh, ishto en ani kover. I might be inheriting my brother, but his wife, I don't need to bury her. In other words, my issue is with my brother. I get the inheritance of my brother. Whatever property he had, that's mine, right? I get it. I split it with my brothers, whatever. That's mine. But, right, now, this is all the brothers who are claiming that they're supposed to bury her. But what does his wife's burial have anything to do with me? Okay, no, we don't know exactly why he's saying he's showing and ani kover, but we're going to, and he's basically saying, my issue is with me and my brother. His widow, she has nothing to do with me. I never took on any responsibility toward her. I don't have anything. So Amalei Abaye, what are you talking about? Mishum debayim alav mishnei tzadim. This is like, well, let's say, you could put a gun to his head and say, look, you either do this or you do that, but you have no way out. Why? Im achiv yoresh yikbor et ishto. What are you talking about? With his brother's inheritance comes responsibility, and comes he inherits then the ketuba of the woman, and therefore, in exchange for that, yikbor et ishto, he should bury his wife. Im eino kover et ishto. Now, if you're not willing to bury the wife, then lefachat yitain ketubata. Then at least pay her ketuba money to her heirs. Now, again, what did the Mishnah say? Her ketuba money, right? The 200 zuz she was supposed to get and all that. Since, normally, if she dies in the lifetime of her husband inherits. So the brothers are inheriting the brother's estate. They should inherit her ketuba. So comes Abaye, and as Rava tries to say, okay, they're inheriting his estate, but they don't have any responsibility to the wife. Comes Abaye and says, of course they have responsibility to the wife. They're inheriting her ketuba. So in place of that, they have responsibility to the wife. And if you want to say they don't have responsibility to the wife and they're not going to bury her to the woman, then to his widow, then at least they shouldn't be gaining the ketuba, because the ketuba is in replacement, right? One is it's tit for tat. He gets the ketuba in place of, if she dies, she's supposed to be, right? He's supposed to bury her. This is the husband. So if they take the ketuba, then they basically should be paying for a burial. And if they're not, then at least try to inherit your brother, but take that amount of money that she was deserving to get in her ketuba and give it to her family. So Abaye doesn't like what Rava is saying at all. To which Rava says, no, you didn't understand what I was saying. Okay. So now he says the following. Amarle, hachi kamino. What I'm trying to tell you is the following. Achani yoresh et ishto enani kovel. Okay, he's repeating the same thing right now. It's basically, right, our inheritance we got from our brother. We have nothing, right? We didn't inherit anything from this woman, right? Like, for example, they didn't get her nichse melog, right? Saying, we don't have anything to do with you. Now, imi shum ketuba, you want to say, now again, think about it. What's the ketuba? The ketuba that they inherited, it's just that they don't have to pay her what she's deserving of, right? The 200 zuz was a responsibility the husband took upon to pay her in the event of death and divorce. Now, in this case, the husband actually did die, and we're going to come back to that. But now the yabam came in his place. What normally happens with the ketuba of a shomer yabam, if you remember? So she gets a ketuba from her first husband. The first husband dies. Instead of her getting her ketuba, she just is supposed to marry the brother, and the ketuba kind of gets passed on. Ketuba of the first brother gets passed on to the second brother. Okay, so now, and if you remember, okay, we talked about this yesterday, that he's responsible for paying he basically has to pay her ketuba later in the event that he divorces her or he dies. And because of that, he can't really access, we're going to talk about this a lot later today, he can't access the brother's money while he inherits it, but he really can't access it because it's liened to her ketuba. Now, in this case, the woman dies, so there is no ketuba, basically. So he says, and not only that, but in this case, right, if you want to say when, there was a ketuba here, well, lo nitna ketuba ligavot mechayim. This is the complicated term, but I'm going to explain it now. The way the Gemara is going to explain it, which is, there's words in the ketuba that say, okay, it's written in Rashi, okay, we'll get there in a minute. But when you get remarried, okay, or it really means when you have the potential to get remarried to someone else, that's going to be an important word. Take what's in your ketuba. Okay, what I promised you. That's one of the sentences in the ketuba. So comes Rav and he says, based on, we're going to see Beit Shamai, who holds that we can darshan words in the ketuba. Okay, this was something we saw before, that the rabbis darshaned words in the ketuba the way they darshaned words in the Torah. It's like, oh, it says this, that means we can derive this law. Not everybody did that, but that's what Rav is doing. He says, listen, it says in the ketuba, when you're free to marry anyone you want, and that's how they're darshaning it, right? When you're free to marry anyone you want, you can get the ketuba. And that is, when does a woman get a ketuba? Either the husband divorces her. In that case, she's free to marry anyone she wants. Or the husband dies, in which case she's free to marry anyone she wants. Except for what case? Yibum. In a yibum case, she's not free to marry anyone she wants. She can only marry the yabam, basically, until he does chalitza. So comes this yabam and he says, I don't owe you anything, according to Rava, because you weren't even deserving of your ketuba. Your ketuba, you're supposed to, there's no ketuba mechayim. What does mechayim mean? When the husband is still alive. That's not exactly true. Doesn't mean when the husband's alive. What do you mean? The husband can divorce her and have to give her the ketuba. But in a case where the husband dies, she wasn't worthy of getting the ketuba until what time? Until such time as she's free to marry anyone she wants. That's either divorce or death, but death without chiyuv yibum. So this was a woman who was shomer yabam. She wasn't free to marry anyone she wants. So her ketuba wasn't relevant because there's no such thing. It's not like you could say, you have to pay the ketuba. What ketuba? I don't have to pay the ketuba. What does it mean he inherits? The ketuba goes to the brothers. The fact that he doesn't need to pay the money to the woman goes to the brothers, right? It's not like there's money there. It's basically the 200 as he promised, any tosefet he promised. Let's just leave the nichsei tzon barzal on the side right now. But the basic ketuba is just a dissolving of something he should have owed her, but he never needed to owe her this money because she was never in the state of, I can go marry anyone I want. She wasn't in that state. So that's what Rava says. So Rava basically says, number one, he could say, I inherited your brother. I didn't inherit your stuff, so I don't have to. Let's remember, the fact that he inherits her ketuba is what gives him the responsibility to bury her. He says, I didn't inherit your ketuba. I inherited my brother. And you want to say I inherited your ketuba? I didn't inherit your ketuba. Your ketuba was never given to be paid because I was still alive and you were supposed to marry me and I never divorced you. I never died. I don't owe you anything. So comes Abaye with the following comment and he says, I don't agree with you, Rava. Why? You're inconsistent within your opinion. Man shamalei le midrash ketuba. Who's the one who says we can darshan words in the ketuba? Beit Shamai. Beit Hillel doesn't hold that way. Okay, now you might say, so that means we don't hold that way. No, that's not where he's going. He's going to quote something else Beit Shamai says. It says, if you're going with Beit Shamai, then you got to go with him all the way, and then you're wrong again. Okay? Before we move on, I just want to point out, there are some cases where Beit Hillel does darshan the words of the ketuba, and that's what raises the problem. What do you mean? Doesn't it say only Beit Shamai does? So Tosfos tries to make a distinction about what type of drasha can you darshan, yes, some no. Anyway, that's just an aside point. Sham'ina lehu Beit Shamai. So if Beit Shammai is the one who darshans the words in the ketuba, which would then come to this conclusion that so long as the woman isn't free to marry anyone she wants, like in this case, then she can't get her, that there is no ketuba to talk about. Well, Sham'ina lehu Beit Shammai de'amre, but Beit Shammai holds somewhere else, which we'll see in a minute, where shtar ha'omed legavot kigavoy dam. When you have something that is theoretically could be paid, it's as if it's paid. Meaning that in this case, the woman, now go back to our timeline. First, the husband died. Then she fell to yibum to the brother. Then the brother took over the other brother's ketuba, right? He was supposed to, but he never really did because she never got to the stage where she was worthy of getting the ketuba, right? Had they got married and gotten divorced or he died, so the first ketuba would be relevant. Comes Abaye and he says, wait a minute. If you want to say that only when she's free to marry other people can she do this, and that really there was no ketuba to be had here. But wait a minute. When the first husband died, this wasn't a case of mechayim, that the husband's alive. That first husband actually died. So there was a moment there. Okay, let's say, now it's not really true. And the Gemara is going to ask this in a few minutes. But let's just assume, okay, there was this moment for a second where her husband died and she was worthy of getting the ketuba. What happened though? She fell to yibum to the brother. But when the first husband died, that already wasn't a ketuba of mechayim, right? The husband had died. She was worthy to get the ketuba. Beit Shammai holds, as soon as someone's worthy to get a document, it's as if it's in their hands, which means that you can't come and say this woman's ketuba was never relevant. It was relevant for a moment there. Now, before we get back to the answer to this, we're going to have a Mishna that says, Ditznam, we're going to prove how we know the Beit Shammai holds. This is why the daf is a little confusing because there's things within things until you get back to the flow. How do we know, although it's very organized, how do you know that a shtar that's supposed to be collected is as if it's already collected? So for this, we go to the woman who's a Sotah. Woman who's a Sotah is a woman who's suspected of being with another man, right? There's some more details of it. I'm not going to get into all those details. Soon we'll get to Masachet Sotah. Anyway, they're supposed to do this. The husband's supposed to bring her to the temple, and they make this water concoction, right? I'm not going to get into all the details of what's in it. She's supposed to drink it, and that's supposed to prove is she innocent or guilty. Now, Ditznam, right? Did she cheat on him? Did she not cheat on him? Now remember, a woman who cheats on her husband is obviously not going to get her ketuba money. A woman who doesn't cheat on her husband is deserving of her ketuba money. This case, and the Mishnah describes, a Mishnah in Sotah, Meitu ba'alehen. Okay, we're talking about multiple sotot. Okay, there were a bunch of sotot, and their husbands died. I don't know, it could have been in the singular. Ad shalosh shatu, before they drank the Sotah waters. So we don't know if they were guilty or not. So did they get their ketuba? Did they not get their ketuba? So what would you say, right? Safek, we don't know, so don't give them the ketuba, right? Because if you want to take money out of the estate of the sons, you have to prove that she wasn't a zonah. Well, Beit Shammai doesn't say that. Beit Shammai notzlot tuba v'lo shotot. They don't drink. Let's start from the end. They don't drink the Sotah water. That's because you only drink the Sotah waters if the husband brings her to the temple and he's dead, so he can't bring her. So they don't drink it, and they get their ketuba money. We're gonna have to explain this in a minute why they get it. Ubeit Hillel omrim o shotot. Either they drink the waters, which doesn't make any sense because we just said you don't drink the waters if the husband's dead. So hold off. Either they drink the Sotah waters, lo notzlot tuba, or they don't get their ketuba. To which the Gemara says that doesn't make any sense. O shotot, they can't drink it. The husband's supposed to bring his wife to the Kohen in the temple. He's not alive. Amar Rachmana, right? The Torah said Vileka, and there is no option of doing that. He's dead. Ella, what he meant was mitoch shelo shotot lo notzlot tuba. And that's the obvious approach. Since they don't drink the Sotah waters, they don't get their ketuba because there's no way to prove that they were definitely innocent. To which Beit Shammai now says, Beit Shammai omrim notzlot ketuba v'lo shotot. V'amai, why? Sfekahu, sapek zanai, sapek lo zanai. We don't know. Maybe they slept around with someone. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they cheated. Maybe they didn't. V'ka'ate sapek u'motzimite vadai. In other words, the estate of the husband now is holding the money. They're vadai. This is our money. We just inherited from our father. She's a case of sapek. Maybe I'm deserving my ketuba, maybe I'm not. 50-50 chance. Did she cheat? Did she not cheat? So we don't have a sapek allow us to take money, which was vadai. which they say, here we go back to what we were trying to prove, Kasaf le Beit Shamai shtar ha'omed legavot ki gavoidan. Beit Shamai holds that a shtar that was meant to be collected is as if it's collected. Husband dies, what happens? Immediately, the ketuba is meant to be collected by the woman. In this case, even though the money technically is in the hands of the heirs, it's as if it's in her hands. And therefore, flips. The sons have to prove that she's an adulteress in order to keep the money. And since they have no way to prove that, she wins out. Okay, so that proves this point that shtar ha'omed ligavot, a document that you're supposed to collect, when the moment of collection clicks in, it's as if it's yours. So as soon as the moment of collection came at the death of the husband, it was as if it was hers. Well, there's a suffix. Maybe she was an adulteress. Well, if you can't prove it, then she's going to get her money. So now, what was the whole issue? We claim that as soon as the husband died, right? Abaye, okay, where are we in the argument? Again, Abaye said the sons have to either bury her, or the brothers, have to either bury her or pay the ketuba to her relatives. Came Rava and said, no, they could say, the money I got from my brother, not connected to his wife at all. Ketuba? She doesn't have a ketuba, because ketuba is not relevant when I'm still alive and I'm alive. To which Abaye said, what do you mean? The ketuba was, and Abaye is not even saying according to his approach. He's saying according to your approach. You want to go with Beit Shamai? Well, Beit Shamai holds that as soon as, and then the Beit Shamai holds that a shtar that's supposed to be collected is as if it's collected, meaning as soon as the husband died, almost like there was this moment before yibum kicked in, and her responsibility to marry the brother, she was supposed to get her ketuba then. And that's why it's as if it was hers already, because shtar mei legavot ki gavoidan. To which the Gemara asked, that's not true though. There was no second. I'm thinking of, right, we're going into Rosh Hashanah, I'll connect it, right? Between the first night and the second night of Rosh Hashanah, is there a moment where you could do malacha in between? No, it's not like, okay, ends the first day, starts the next day, right? Like when the kids are little, they always think like, okay, so we're going to have a minute there where we could do something, there is no such thing. So, but in order for the ketuba to kick in when the first husband dies, there has to be fulfillment of that sentence. When you are free to marry someone else, right? Someone else, which we interpreted to mean you're free to marry anyone you want, you can get your ketuba. And that didn't happen here because she was only allowed to marry the yabam. To which the Gemara answers, right? This is against Abaye's whole question against Rava. To which Rav Ashi answers for Abaye, yabam nami ke'acher dami. She could have married someone else. Someone else was that yabam. In other words, there still was an opportunity, right, where that marriage ended and she could have married someone else. So there was room for the ketuba to kind of kick into place. And therefore, it's as if she collected it. And therefore, Abaye goes back to his theory that even according to your logic, if he doesn't bury her, he should have to give the ketuba back to her heirs. But it doesn't end yet. Shalach le Rava Abaye b'yah Rav Shmaya bar Zera. So he sent a message to Abaye through his messenger, and he said, V'hatanya. But wait, there's a braita that goes against what you're saying. And again, we're going to have a question within a question before we get to Abaye's response. V'hatanya, doesn't it say in a braita? Rabbi Abba Omer, Sha'alti et sumchus. So Rabbi Abba says, remember Rabbi Abba, because after they get back to this question within the question, they're going to go back and say, but we have the question of Rabbi Abba. And that's this. Sha'alti et sumchus. I asked sumchus, Harotzeh she'imkor b'nechsei achiv ketzad oseh. If you are the yabam and you marry your brother's wife, so again, what happens? You inherit, and this is very important to understand, you inherit your brother's property. However, right, because the yabam, if you remember, he's mekim at Beit Achiv, and he basically, we learned a lot of it is the money part. He gets all the inheritance of the brother. Now, when we learned it in Yavamo, we all thought, oh, he gets the inheritance of the brother, like it's all his. But it's not true. What we learn now is he gets all the stuff of the brother. However, he's not free to do whatever he wants with it because all of the brother's property is liened to the ketuba of this woman, of his yavama. So if he wants to, during his marriage with the yavama, while the ketuba is still liened, as long as they haven't gotten divorced and she hasn't gotten her payments yet, or he hasn't died, she hasn't gotten the ketuba payments yet. So all of the brother's property, because remember, he doesn't write a ketuba to the wife. It's all based on the first husband's ketuba. So all of his property, the brother's property, is liened to the ketuba. That means he can't sell it, can't do anything with it. So comes Sumchus, was asked the following question, right? Rabbi Abba asked him, if you want to sell some of your brother's property, how do you do it? There must be a solution. So he says like this, very strange solution. Im kohenhu, if he's a kohen, okay, you're going to see why a kohen, because a kohen can't divorce her and remarry her. So since divorce is not an option, we'll see in a minute that if you aren't a kohen, divorce her, remarry her. And then the lien we'll get back to that one in a minute. But if you're a kohen and you can't do that solution, he should make a nice meal and give her some wine and talk to her and say, listen, I know that all this property is leading to your ketuba, but maybe we could leave aside one field for you to collect from there. And the rest of it, maybe you'll let me sell. And if she agrees, then theoretically he can do it. Okay? Im Yisraelhu, but if, okay, apparently they thought this was going to be more effective than trying to convince the wife. If it's Yisrael, or at least it means if it doesn't work to try to lifayet Sotah and have a nice meal with her and get her to doing what you want, right? Food always works in that kind of way, or not always, but it could. Usually it's the reverse, right? The wife can get the husband to do things when she makes him a good meal. Here it's kind of funny. Anyway, megaresh beget v'yachzir. Seems like a crazy solution. Give her a get. Once you give her a get, what happens? You'll have to give her the ketuba money of the first brother, right? Then kind of the lien is off. He can give her money, give her sell the rest, and then remarry her and give her a new ketuba. And then, now, when you're married to the woman, well, of course, you can sell whatever you want. Remember, because what happens? You sell it and you can always get it back from whoever, she can always demand it back from your purchasers. Anyway, the point is, your own money is free money, but your brother's money, you really can't access until you divorce the wife. So divorce. Now, Isal Kadatach, here comes the question of Rava against Abaye. If you want to say against what I said, that nitnak ketuba ligavot michayim, that theoretically he could give her the ketuba money when he's still alive, because you went against me. I said, of course, you can't, right? Unless she's free to marry anyone she wants, he can't give her ketuba money. Well, if you were right, it was a much easier solution than divorcing and remarrying or trying to convince her over a meal. He could just Shiur ketuba v'ashar lizabin. He could just designate a field in the amount of the ketuba, because if the ketuba can be given to the woman during his lifetime, then okay, so we could designate the money for her, put it aside, say, this is yours for your ketuba, and sell the rest of the brother's property, right? He could have taken his brother's property to do this, right? Put aside one field and left the rest for her. And because it doesn't say that you could do that, it must be that you can't, and it must be that you're wrong, that the ketuba is not, right? It's not given to be collected when the husband's still alive. Before we get to Abaye's answer, the Gemara is going to say, wait a minute, according to what Rava just said, you have a much better question than that braita that we just quoted of Rabbi Abba. You have our Mishna. Lot ve'mi matnitin. Question from our Mishna. What did the Mishna say? Lo yomar la harei ketubatech munach alach ala shulchan. You remember this? He can't say to her, here's some movable property, right, on the table. Take this for your ketuba. Ela kol nechasim achrein lektubata. He can't tell her, this money is set aside for your ketuba, and everything else, right? I can now have access to all my brother's property. He can't do that. So why don't you ask from there? It's obvious. That would also prove because he can't put aside money. To which the Gemara says, no, you misunderstood the Mishna. The Mishna is not saying this is the law, that you can't do that. You actually, this would be, according to Abaye, you could say this could be done, because theoretically you could designate a ketuba in her lifetime. However, it's just good advice. Best off not doing this. Why is it good advice? Because what will happen if you do that? If you set aside some movable item, okay, you have a gold necklace, and you say, this gold necklace will be for your ketuba. What do we all know happens to gold necklaces? They could get lost, right? Something could happen to it. If it's not gold and it's something that isn't going to last a long time, it could get destroyed, right? Anything could happen to it. That's just good advice. Don't do that, because if you sell all the rest of the brother's property, what's going to happen? You'll have no property left to give her a ketuba. And then in that case, if you remember with the yabam, if there's no ketuba from the first husband, you have to provide a ketuba yourself. So then you're going to be out of money. So it's a bad plan. Okay, not that it's the law though. And that's why he didn't ask from the Mishna. And now they're going to further prove, again, we're still within this question within a question. There's further proof that the Mishnah is clearly talking about Eitzat Tovah, and that comes from the next line in the Mishnah. De'ilo temahachi. If you don't say it's Eitzat Tovah, it's just good advice, but you say it's the law, it's definitely not true, because look at the next line. So Seifa Dikatani, the next line says, V'chein lo yomar adam li'ishto. A man can't say to his wife, this is not a yibum case, a regular husband married to a wife, can't say, Harei ketubatech munach ala shulchan. Also can't say, here's this gold necklace, this is for your ketuba. All of his property is liened to that. Now, are you going to say, of course, a husband's allowed to sell any property he wants. First of all, it's all liened anyway to her ketuba. But the point is, right, only when you're a yabam are you in this situation where you're not allowed to sell your brother's property because it's not yours. But when you're a husband married to a woman, he could sell any property that's his own. He doesn't lose his rights to sell his own property when he marries her. So therefore, ela itzat tovah kamashman. It just must be telling you, don't set aside movable property for the woman to get her ketuba and then go sell everything else, because you're going to end up, that might get lost, and then you'll have to, then you're going to have a problem because you sold it to someone. Yes, it's true she'll get her ketuba money, but you'll have to end up paying that person back the money. It'll be a big balagan. So you don't want to start getting into that. So therefore, since that line was eitzat tovah hanami, this line is also eitzat tovah kamashman. They're just trying to teach you good advice. But anyway, that was a question within a question. Why didn't Rava question Abaye from the Mishnah? And the answer is because the Mishnah is not the law. The Mishnah is just good advice. Ela de Rabbi Abba Kashya, and that's what I said, right? Remember Rabbi Abba. Well, again, let's go back to Rabbi Abba because it's confusing. Rabbi Abba said, if you want to sell your brother's nechasim, what should you do? If you're a Kohen, get her, have a meal, and encourage her to do it, agreeing to it, and then it'll be okay. Or, right, again, meaning don't sell everything, but at least you want to sell part of it, convince her that the rest of it will be for ketuba, and she'll allow you to sell part of it. Or if not, divorce her and remarry her. Why didn't it suggest give her ketuba already mechayim? Came Rav and he said it's obviously because you can't give her ketuba money when you're still alive. Okay, and that was proving Rava against Abaye, who disagreed about that concept. So, de Rabbi Abba nami lo kashya mishum eva. Interesting, and it's interesting in terms of what they do suggest, but they didn't make that suggestion. Why? They thought that if you're married to a yabam and the yabam sets aside money for your ketuba and says, this is for your ketuba, what would you think? He's planning to divorce you. In other words, you're living with a man who's already getting your ketuba ready. Either he thinks he's dying tomorrow, which probably that's not the case, or you think he's going to divorce you. Why else would he set aside money? So it's going to create tension in the marriage of the woman thinking he's going to divorce her at any moment. What's kind of ironic about it is, instead, what do they suggest to do? Divorce her and remarry her, as if that's better for her emotionally. And what they claim, the commentaries say, well, once he divorces her and then remarries her, he shows that he clearly wants to stay married to her because he's remarried her. Also, it shows that it was kind of fictitious. Anyway, he didn't really mean to do it. He was just trying to release the lien on the property. And it was clear that he does love her and he wants to stay married. Again, it's a bit of a strange thing to think about going through a divorce process and then just to get remarried. It sounds like they're treating divorce very flippantly. It's a very odd suggestion. I have to agree. Okay, next. Now we get to a case, and this is going to be a case that we're going to see some other similar cases to it in tomorrow's talk as well. Hahu gavra denafala yavama b'pubedita. A yavama falls to him, meaning his brother died, no children, and he's supposed to marry the sister. Now, we have a few brothers. If you remember from Yavamot, if you learned Yavamot, the older brother's supposed to do it. He gets first dibs. If he doesn't want it, then it goes to the younger brother. Another thing to remember from Yavamot is that if one of the brothers, any one of them, it doesn't matter, and theoretically any could do yibum, it's just that normally we go the oldest first. That's learned out from the verses. If one of them gives her a get, which is totally irrelevant because a get doesn't help her. But if he gives her a get, it shows that they're kind of rejecting her, which means that at that point, you're not allowed to do yibum. Okay, that's also learned out from the Psukim. I'm not going to repeat all the drashot now. But the main thing is, if one brother gives her a get, nobody can do yibum. None of the brothers are allowed. One has to do chalitza, hasn't released her yet, but has to do chalitza. So there was this guy who was supposed to do yibum to the sister-in-law. The younger brother comes along. Now, remember what happens. When one brother does yibum, he inherits all of the brother's property. If nobody does yibum and they do chalitza, then they split the property. So comes this brother and he says, the younger brother knows he's not first in line. He wants to get the property of the brother. So what does he do? He gives her a get so that the brother will have to do chalitza. So he goes to give her a get. And then what happens? The brother, the older brother sees that the brother's about to give her a get. Maybe he went to a sofer to write up a get. Amrle, my datech, what are you trying to do here? What's motivating you? Right? Is it money? Right? So I'll pay you. Right? So what does he say? Mishum nichse, you want the money? That's what this is all about. Ana b'nichse pagin. I'll promise you half of our brother's estate. Okay? If you let me do yibum, I'll inherit the property. I'll give you half. Amar Rav Yosef. Question is, now what happens? They get married. He inherits the brother's property. And then he says, oh, yeah, I promised you something I couldn't promise you. Because why? Because remember, he's not allowed to sell the brother's property. So remember that it's not his until, right? Property is liened to ketuba. He can't sell it. So Amar Rav Yosef, and the brother says, what do you mean? You promised me half the property. Keep to your promise. So we're going to have a big machloket, Abaye and Rav Yosef. Okay, the big machloket today we have is Abaye Rav, and now Abaye and Rav Yosef. Amar Rav Yosef, Kevanda Amar Rabbanan lo lezabin. Since the rabbi said you're not allowed to sell his property, Afagav dezabin, even though he did sell it, lo avaz vine zvine. Okay, it wasn't a sale, but it was a gift. Gifted it to his brother. He didn't have the power to do it, so it's useless. The brother has no rights to it. The brother who did yibum, he gets everything. How do we know this? Titania, as it says in a braita. Mishamet, yabam. Now we're going to see this law that you can't sell his property. If he dies and he leaves a shomer yabam, he had 100 times 100, right? He had 100 piles of 100 zuzim. Even if the ketuba is only worth 100 and he has 100 times that amount, lo yimko, he can't sell. All of his property is liened to the ketuba. He can't sell anything. It's not his to sell. So comes Rav Yosef and he says, look, he can't sell it. If he did, it's not valid. Amarle Abaye, what are you talking about? Remember Daf Ayin Chet? Okay, he's going to now quote our Mishna Ayin Chet. It says, just because the rabbi says you can't sell something, does that mean your sale isn't valid? Remember we talked that whole Mishna about b'di'evet lechatchila, right? Ideally, she's not allowed to sell. Remember this, the nichse malog of the woman, Bahatznan, Beit Shamai Omrim, if she inherits property while she's betrothed to him, Beit Shamai says, Timkor, she can sell it. Beit Hillel Omrim lo Timkor, Beit Hillel says she can't sell that. And Elu ve'elu modim, they both agree though, she'im acharav v'natzna kayam, they both agree that after the fact, if she did it, as we call it, b'di'eved, it's fine, the sale is a sale. So if her sale is a sale when she had no rights to sell it, maybe in this case, just as well, his sale is a sale, even though he wasn't supposed to do it. So even though ideally he's not supposed to sell the brother's property, if he did and promised it to the brother, maybe it's anyway a valid sale. So that's what Abaye is. So we have this machloket Abaye and Rav Yosef, and it gets more complicated. Not so much complicated in terms of content, but complicated in terms of it clearly was an issue. So they sent it to Rabbi Chanina bar Papa to see who he sides with. Rabbi Yosef, he said like Rav Yosef, the sale, not a sale. Abaye got very upset with this, and he said, Amar Abaye, Atu Rabbi Chanina bar Papa, kipi talela. Did he hang any jewelry on it? What does that mean? Well, it's very nice to say, I hold like Rav Yosef, but he didn't bring any proof. He didn't bring any reasoning. He didn't, like, it's very nice to say, I hold like him, but explain yourself. Like, you didn't add anything. So it's very nice. I now have another person who agrees with him, but that doesn't do anything for me. Like, it doesn't convince me, that's very not strong. Then, Shachor l'kamei Rav Manyumai berei Rav Nechumi. So they send it to him. Shalcha kedabai. He sends back like Abaye. And not only that, he says, the Amar ba Rav Yosef tamachrina. If Rav Yosef comes up with any more reasoning to prove his point, shalchuli, send it to me, I'll deal with it. Okay? I'll knock it down. I'm sure that Abaye is right, that again, this sale is not a valid sale. Right? I'm sorry. This sale is valid. It's valid anyway. Okay? And if Rav Yosef tries to prove otherwise, that the sale was invalid, I'm going to knock him down. So you see how people were very passionate about this. Nafak Rav Yosef daf eshkach. Well, Rav Yosef, I think when he heard that, he said, okay, I'm going to find a good proof. He's not going to knock me down. Titania, he finds a braita. So we have one brother who owes another brother money. Okay, so one brother borrowed money from his other brother. The brother he borrowed money from dies without children. So now his wife falls to yibum to this guy. Okay, the guy who owed his brother money. He now owes the brother money, but he's also going to inherit all the brother's property. So if he left a wife who was now supposed to do yibum, he can't say, since I inherit all of his property anyway, well, I don't even need to return him the money because it's all mine anyway. He can't say that. Why? He basically has to take the amount he owes and do what we've seen before a few times now, that he has to turn it into land and eat the fruits of that so that there's land left at the end to pay the ketuba for the woman, right? Because again, he doesn't have access. So what do you see here? Here, when there's not even money to transfer hands because it's all in the same hand, it doesn't work. So lo havas vine zvine. So that proves Rav Yosef. Amalei Abaye dilma de tabule avdule. Maybe they're just giving him good advice. Don't you want to keep property for the wife? And maybe this is just a good thing to do. But maybe it's not that you have to do it. George Gemara says, no. Hamarle, tane motziin, va'arta marta tabale avdule. You can't say it's good advice when the language of the braita is, we take it out of his hands. Okay, look at the words. It says, he can't say, since I inherit, hechezakti, ela motziin yabam, we take it out of his hands. That's clear. It's the law. Okay, so that is rejected. So anyway, Abaye didn't know what to do with it. So what did he do? We remember what Rav Manyumai said. If Rav Yosef brings a proof, come bring it to me. So they bring it to Rav Manyumai. Hador shalchua kamei de Rav Manyumai b'rei de Rav Nechumi. Amar lehu hachi amar Rav Yosef Rav Manyumai. Amar Rav Nachman. Okay, they quoted Rav Yosef, the son of Rav Manyumai, not the same Rav Yosef that we had before, who says in the name of Rav Nachman, zo ein Mishna. That braita is bad. Okay, it's not. Sometimes they were braita that people passed down that were just wrong. It's a mistaken braita. So now the Gemara is going to try to have to figure out, and you'll have to wait till the next stuff to really understand what was wrong with this braita. So we're going to try 2 attempts right now. First one we'll reject. The second one we'll leave for tomorrow. For whenever you learn tomorrow, it'll be up right after class. Anyway, it's already up. My time at here's a good reason why it would be a mistake. Because it's talking about movables. What are movables here? The money. It was money. It was cash, right? He owed him money, and instead of paying the money, he wanted to this, all right? And what did they say, right? It's not a valid, right? It's motzi'im yado, right? Basically, we make him pay the money. That's because metaltalid, and why would this be a mistake? It's a mistake because money is metaltalid, and it's movables. And movables aren't liened to the ketuba, right? You only have liens on property. So that's why this is a total mistake. Of course, he can just dissolve the loan and ignore it because the money of this is wrong because this is money and money is not liened to a ketuba. So it's not liened. So they say, no, that's not the reason why it's a mistake because Dilma Rabbi Meir Hidamar, if you remember, we've seen this a bunch of times already, maybe it's Rabbi Meir who says metaltalid movables can be mishuabat to a ketuba. That can't be why it's a mistake. Okay, so I'll just start the next one, but we'll really learn it more in the next step, which is he could say to her, I have nothing to do with you. In other words, this is between me and the brother and you. Oh, you claim you have the ketuba. That wasn't me. I didn't promise you the ketuba. I don't have anything to do with you about this. Okay, well, we'll talk about what this means more in tomorrow's class when we reject it. Anyway, right now we'll end here. So basically, we're in the middle of this conversation between Abaye and Rav Yosef, trying to figure out if he promises the brother, and I want to repeat this because we're going to have another case like this where another guy promises the brother, and he remembers this case. He says, I'm not going to do it like that guy because that guy didn't work, but I'm going to try a different way, and we'll see if it works or not. But basically, we have this debate, Rav Yosef and Abaye, about whether the sale is valid in any case, even though he's not really supposed to, or is it not? With that, we'll finish for today. I'm wishing everyone a Shana Tova, very happy, healthy new year. Shana Tova tikatevu v'techatenu. Meet up after the Chag. And the 2 dapim are already up, and I will send out links again after class just so everybody has them accessible.